The Six Nations is right around the corner. I cannot believe that we're a week away from the start of the tournament. What is it? In an hour or so, in a week's time, it is going to be France against Ireland. And by the way, what a blockbuster of a game to kick things off. Or is it a shame, maybe, that that is the first game of the championship, given that we expect them, once again, to be the two best sides in the competition? That's a discussion for another day. Welcome back to the channel. Make sure you're subscribed and all that sort of stuff. But in this video, I'm asking the question, what constitutes success for every team in this year's Six Nations? What would be deemed a successful championship for each of those teams once they've played their 5 fixtures and the dust settles in a couple of months' time in March? I think it's quite an interesting question, actually. I'm going to go through each team in this video. You can have your say in the comments section, whether you agree, whether you disagree. What for your nation would be a successful 2024 Six Nations? It's very, very interesting. I'm going to start off with Ireland and France because I think it's the most obvious answer, in that they have been the two best teams in the Six Nations over the last 2 years. They've played the best rugby. They're the most settled, I think, in terms of the squads. Scotland maybe are fairly settled themselves as well. But is it just to win it? Is anything other than that for Ireland and for France, would it be deemed a failure? Is it all or nothing? They have to win the championship. I think there are other areas we can go with this discussion in terms of Ireland and France overall. But I think if we really look at it, if you're looking at a final placing for those two teams, they need to win it, which actually I think is a reflection of the excellence of both teams over the last few years. I think we are potentially, and we need to see what happens this year, living in a time where it could become an iconic Six Nations rivalry or an iconic rivalry of a certain era, possibly. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself there. But I think you can break it down in a few other ways for Ireland and France. For Ireland, I suppose there's the question of how do they look without Johnny Sexton? And even if they don't win the championship, if with Crowley or whoever it is, they still look like arguably the best team in the world with a new fly half coming in, plus obviously the experience, the leadership, the influence Sexton would have had on this Ireland team. I suppose you could still deem it a success. Ireland fans, you tell me if I'm right or wrong with this one, even if you don't win it, but let's say you look at the team and you still think, yeah, do you know what, we're going to be all right without Sexton. Everything Andy Farrell has done, the direction we're moving is going to continue, despite losing a player of his quality and influence. I could understand why some Ireland fans might deem that a success still. And on the flip side, if we talk about France, how do they look without Dupont? Maybe French fans will say, if they can still be as good as we probably expect them to be without Dupont, I mean, now look, they've got Maxime Lucu most likely going to start at 9, who is no mug, who's linking up with Jalabert, his club teammate, who are both playing unbelievable stuff for Bordeaux. So I think they will be okay. But maybe in a similar vein, French fans will look at it and say, even without the best player on the planet, we are still serious operators. I don't think that argument works as well for France because they're playing Ireland at home. I think because they're playing Ireland at home, they will expect to win that. They win that game, I think we would expect them to go on and win the Six Nations. So, yeah, it is interesting. As I say, I think success for Ireland and France, because of the levels they have achieved, it's winning it, which is a huge compliment in a way, but there are some other things to keep an eye on as well. Let's move on to some of the other teams. Scotland, I mean, it has to be winning 4 matches, doesn't it, for Scotland? They've got over various different hurdles over the last few years. In the last Six Nations, they won their first 2 games for the first time, or the first time in a long, long time. So they started the tournament better. They've got over the hump of beating England and beating England at Twickenham. Beating Wales away, actually, their opening game. That's something they haven't done for a couple of decades. So that's maybe another one. But with Scotland, it is always, can they genuinely compete? Now, I don't know right here, right now, looking at the squads, looking at what we've seen even at the World Cup, if you compare Scotland to Ireland and France, whether Gregor Townsend's men are quite in a position where they are going to be able to seriously compete with them. But 4 wins, surely. Can they get 1 win over one of Ireland or France, even if it means they don't win the championship. I think that is probably, Scotland fans can tell me if I'm right or wrong, what would constitute a successful Six Nations from a Scotland point of view. It's beating one of Ireland or France. I think it's a tall order. As I say, on paper, I would still have Ireland and France ahead of them. But France at Murrayfield, I don't know, we've seen it over the last 4 years. Some funny things have happened there. Scotland have actually got a pretty good record against the French at home. So who knows? But I think 4 wins for Scotland is success. On to England. So here's a question. Is success for England in this Six Nations about performance or about results? And the truthful answer is it's probably somewhere in between. But the reason I ask that is England, obviously, bronze medal at the World Cup, a very fortuitous draw, didn't play great rugby, but they did what they needed to do to get themselves to a semi-final and get themselves to a position where they end up finishing third. But because of that, I think there is a huge expectation on Steve Borthwick to build upon those foundations, in particular in an attacking sense, to show something more, to get the fans more excited. England have not been a good team to watch over the last few years. At the World Cup, there were probably reasons for that, but now, where they are, they need to show better performances, but then also they need the results, because England have been rubbish in the Six Nations over the last few years. They haven't started the tournament well at all. They've lost their opening game over the last few tournaments. They haven't been able to build any sort of momentum. So which one is it? Performance or results, or a bit of both, I suppose? They also need to get the hoodoo of Scotland off their back. As I just mentioned, talking about Scotland, they've got the rub of England recently. They've got a difficult trip away to Murrayfield. I think that's a big challenge for them. So realistically, I feel for England, it's 3 wins. I still don't have the expectation that they will beat Ireland or France, although Ireland at Twickenham, if they can get to that point where they've beaten Italy, they've beaten Wales, they're building momentum, beaten Scotland, maybe at Twickenham, a revitalised Twickenham, you'd say they'd possibly have a chance, but I think realistically it's a tall order. So I think it's 3 wins, and I think it's a better overall performance. It's building upon what we saw at the World Cup, a better defence and a better attack. In particular attack, I think that is a key point for England fans. So the game plan improving. That would be, I think we could deem that a successful campaign for England. If they look like they're closing the gap to France and Ireland, even if they're not quite able to get there. On to Wales and Italy, the final couple of teams. So for me, Wales were the toughest team when I thought about this to work out what is success for Warren Gatland's side in this Six Nations. I mean, they come into it, the regions are in terrible form. They don't have the finances at domestic level to be able to compete with the best teams in the URC or the best teams in the Champions Cup. They've lost Lewis Rees-Zammit, one of their star players, on the eve of the tournament. Gatland found out about an hour before he announced his Wales squad that he was going to be giving the NFL a go. You just wonder where Wales are. So I don't know, this is a really tough one for me. I suppose you'd say, is it 2 or 3 wins? 2 wins feels too low, but equally I look at it and you think, all right, Wales have got Italy at home on the final weekend. You'd back them to beat the Italians. But other than that, where is the victory? Maybe at home to Scotland on the opening weekend. As I just say, Scotland haven't got a good record in Cardiff. Maybe it's there. But if they lose that opening game to Scotland, they then go away to Twickenham. Okay, who knows what England are going to be like. It's another game Wales could win, but I think most people, before a ball has been kicked right here, right now, would have England as favourites for the game. So if Wales are looking at 2 defeats from their opening 2 games, they then play Ireland and France, could they be heading into Cardiff on the final weekend with the wooden spoon on the line against Italy? I don't know, am I being too negative? I feel like I'm being probably realistic of where things are. So I don't know for Wales. That's why I think maybe 2 wins is a success. You can't really brandish 2 wins as success, can you? 3 wins may be a success, but even so, the very fact that this is where the conversation is for Wales I think is a reflection of where they are. I don't know. Let me know. That's kind of my general thoughts on the matter. Let's finish off with Italy. It's one win for Italy. A successful Six Nations for Italy is winning one game. And I think the most likely place that comes from is away to Wales on that last weekend. And I think the Italians will be hoping that Wales go into that game having lost all of their matches as well. The pressure being on them, doing like what we saw them do a couple of years ago with that bit of magic from Ange Capuozzo, you know, scoring a late try, Wales under pressure, getting themselves a victory. But the one other thing actually that I will mention from an Italian point of view is putting the World Cup behind them. I think it's really important, this Six Nations. We didn't expect them to get through that pool with New Zealand and France, but I don't think many of us expected them to be utterly destroyed in the way that they were in some of those pool games. It was demoralising almost to watch. How much of a mental scar does that have on this Italian squad? They've got a new head coach. It's a new era for them. They're one of those teams, it really feels like the start of a new 4-year cycle. I know people don't love talking about the 4-year cycle, but I think Italy are one of the teams that it does feel a bit like that. So for me, it's moving on from the World Cup, showing that they've put that behind them, there's no scars there, and getting one win. I think that is success for the Italians. So what do you make of it? Comment down below. What's success for your nation, or what's success for all Six Nations in the Six Nations? When we get to the end of it, what would be deemed a successful campaign? Now, naturally, this changes as you go through the tournament. You know, if England win their first 3 games, let's say, all of a sudden you'll be saying, well, actually, 3 wins maybe isn't enough. You need to be getting another one. But I think before a ball has been kicked, that's my general feel at the moment of what constitutes success for all these different teams. I think it's quite an interesting way of thinking about it. I think it really sharpens the focus and puts a spotlight on where these teams are at the moment. And they will all be in a very different place come mid-March or whenever it is that the Six Nations ends. That's the nature of it. And it is a championship that does funny things. If you can build momentum, then who knows? We've seen Wales do it plenty of times under Warren Gatland. I'm not saying they're going to do it this time around, but you see teams build momentum and all of a sudden some pretty special things can happen. But that's my general thoughts. I look forward to reading your comments. Like the video as well. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I appreciate you watching. I'll see you in the next one.